Hey guys, I'm going to do a very quick Google Sheets information video. So let's just start with some of the basics with Google Sheets. I already have my data table here, but I'm going to show you how I got there. All right, so some of the panel options that you might use, let's just start up here. Let's just say that your group has a data table and you want to copy and paste it over so you can have your own. Remember, it's make a copy. I would rename it so you can find it. Most of this you probably wouldn't really need to use, but do know that this is something we can do. So when you turn it in, this is what it shows me. All the different things you've done and exactly when you did it and anybody who touched it. So like, let's say you copied and pasted your whole document over, it's going to tell me. All right. I have my data here. So if I were to want to highlight it, say what I'm going to do is going to copy and paste it to my document eventually. Remember, you want the cursor to be that arrow. Left click, drag over. A lot of kids, they'll like click and then accidentally do it again and then like move it. That's because it had that white hand there. That guy means you're going to move it. The cursor means you can click and drag. All right, now I did change my look of my document here a little bit. One thing some kids wanted to do is if you wanted to get to the point where you don't see those grid lines like I have, I don't know why mine didn't come back. There, so there's where you can see all those different grid lines. They're the little lines that mark the columns and the rows. So to get rid of them, you go View, Show Grid Lines, just uncheck that box. The formula bar is this guy right here. I would not remove that because it's kind of nice to know you can always type there. Remember that spreadsheets can actually do math for you. So let's say that I wanted to take my mass divided by my time. I could just type equals. Anytime in spreadsheets you type equals, it's going to tell the system that it's going to have to do something. So it can do anything from simple math to more complex functions. But if you just wanted it to divide this cell, type the slash, the divided by, in this cell and hit enter, it will do that for you. So the reason I'm showing you this is I want to show you the third cursor option. So see that white hand, if I'm in the cell, it'll do that one where I can click and drag or just click or double click to be in the cell. But if I have something here that I wanted to copy down, see how it has that blue circle there? If I hover over that, I get the, oh, what is it called? The word's not working for me, but it looks like a plus sign. So we click and drag down and it's going to pull that formula down for me. Well, it should have. So this one took B3 divided by A3, and this one took B4 divided by A4. So notice how it'll follow. So that's a really handy tool. Another one that you can do with it, so let's say that I wanted to add a column here and I just wanted it to count my trials, but let's say I had a whole bunch of them. I would highlight, click and drag down, and it'll keep doing whatever trend I was doing. So if I was counting by fives, it'll count by fives. If I was counting by ones, it'll count by one. But you need to at least give it enough data points where it knows what you're trying to do. Anytime you want to add or delete a column, you just click on that column header, which is the A, the B, the C, and then right click. And I can delete the column. If I wanted to add another one, just insert one column left, insert right. I'm going to delete and delete. All right, another cool feature is if I wanted to resize, so again, click and drag over so I can highlight. So notice it started off as the cursor, so I was able to select more. And if I wanted to just resize these so they were the same, let's say that they're both wonky and I wanted them to be the same, it could just be like 74, now they're the same width. All right, one thing that was kind of bothering me when I copied and pasted over is this dry mass didn't have a header like time and mass. So I could insert one row below and just add time second. You got to get back in, just double click, backspace. Tab brings you to the right, enter brings you down. So now I'm going to type mass, space, left parenthesis grams. in spreadsheets, you never want to have letters in cells that you're going to want to graph. Okay, so you can't graph it if I put a seconds behind this as a unit. So I put my unit up in my header in parentheses. So dimension unit should always be above your data collection. All right, let's try to graph this data. A lot of you selected here and went down, and then it was really confused which headers. It can do it, but you have to play with the settings. So I think the easiest way is just to pull one header. So like click on time, left click, drag down to the bottom of that data. Remember, we tried to keep dry mass out because that control was much higher than the mass we found in the rest of the lab, and it would end up being an outlier skewing our data. And I couldn't find a way for Google Sheets to drop that outlier. I know Excel can. I don't know if Google Sheets has that functionality yet. So we've highlighted our headers with our units and our data that we want to graph. So let me go up to Insert, go down to Chart. Okay, there is also a shortcut. So with your data selected, oh, mine's not showing. If you're missing any, those 3 dots show you everything else that you're missing. This guy right there, Insert Chart's a shortcut too. All right, let's insert our chart. So sometimes it takes a second to load. Usually it's going to know that it's a scatter chart because of the type of data that you have and how you have it set up. Meaning you should have your independent dimension, your independent variable, in your first column, A here, and your dependent in your B. Let's say that you had another group member and you wanted to have their mass data. So you could say like, let's just say mass 2 grams. And then let's say we had like 1.14. Oop, that did not give me a 1. 1.14, 1.1, 1.0, 0.89. I'm just throwing some random numbers here. So let's pretend like this was our data set. We wanted to add that. One fun thing you can do is I'm going to merge this like I showed you before. So that's the merge cells up here. Notice how the format pulls over. I can also click here, and this little paint tool will copy that. So this, click paint, click where I want it painted to. And it'll copy that format, so the color, the text style, all that'll come over. So I'm just going to do the same thing here, paint it there. So notice it also did my numbers to the same digit I wanted it to. Again, you adjust that by clicking on the column, and then you can remove decimal places with this one and add. Remember, sig fig rules when we are recording is we take everything we can see by the unit we have. So for instance, the scales we used went out to the hundredths place. So where that 4 is, that's how far out we were able to see. But we have to add one estimated digit after. Let me click. And I did too. So I should have a digit in the tenths, the hundredths, and the thousandths place because my estimated digit takes me out one more. Sig fig rules are something we are going to become experts in shortly. All right. So when we were doing this, there was a few times where I wanted to show you if you have 2 sets of series. So this is going to be slightly different because I will have 2 series of information. But see how it automatically knew what I wanted to do? It's because I set it up correctly. You always start with your independent. Time, as time's moving on and you're looking at something, that will always be your independent. Okay, we're not going to be able to influence time, but we're rather seeing what happens as time moves on, what happens to the other stuff. So we are going to look at how this data in here. So under the setup in your chart editor, we are under a scatter chart. If a scatter chart didn't pop up, it's going to be under the pie chart right here. And the other thing you can do in setup is tell it what data. So let's say that I realize I accidentally included this one and it's kind of making it go crazy, or I forgot to add these guys. This box right here, select data range. If you highlight and delete, it lets you go back and select it again and say, okay. So I selected the same data, so it didn't change anything. Here's your double check. Is my x-axis my independent variable? It is. If it was not, you could remove. And then it would allow you to add. So your series are your y-axis data sets. So I have 2 of them because I added another mass set just so we can look at what it would look like here. I will show you once we do our trend lines how to delete that second one. If you end up having a series you wanted to remove, you can remove. I'll delete it right now, actually. I want your data to look like what yours does. Okay, so here is what you've got. Down here it says use row 2 as headers. Remember we have our titles here. And so that's just telling it that that's what we want these to say. Oh, good. It kind of got crazy there on me. So because I deleted that one, I decided to delete my title here. I will show you how to fix that. All right. We have our time and our mass. So the data is correct. The labels look funky. We will fix that in Customize. So in Customize, you can do a lot of like fun color stuff. Like if you wanted to change your backgrounds, yada, yada, all that kind of fun stuff. Make sure that when you're done, that it still looks professional and that it's legible. I need to be able to read what you're doing. So Maximize removes your titles and just makes the graph the whole thing. I think it looks kind of silly, so undo that. All right, so that was chart style, and you can change your font if you would like as well there. Chart and axis title. This one's big. Your chart title should be what your lab data collection is about. So this is bubblegum. Oh boy. Holy biscuits. Bubblegum data collection. And I did tell you for this lab that your subtitle should be like who actually chewed the gum. You can change things like the font size, the font color. It kind of drives me crazy that it automatically does gray. I don't think it pops enough. I think it makes it kind of hard to read, so I like to edit that. All right, so we've got chart title, chart subtitle. That's these 2 guys. My y-axis is not labeled, so that would be my vertical axis. So this is where if it kind of got lost in transit there, we can add it back in. So my vertical axis, or my y, should be mass, and my unit is grams. We will learn this more in the coming weeks, but grams should be lowercase. I'm also going to make that font larger and bold and black. All right, so that's my vertical axis. I'm going to adjust the font size on my horizontal axis as well. I don't know why I have my font. You should keep your font the same. I mean, like, if I have Comic Sans here, I should have Comic Sans up here. So I should really change that. But I'm just going to hustle through this. Okay. Oh. I'm just changing everything to Comic Sans. It needs to be consistent. Otherwise, it does not look professional. All right, there we go. So you can see my data really well. If you ever get done and you're like, oh, crud, I have to go back and change that, you can always just double click on that, and then it'll bring that editor for that portion of it up for you. So super quick. Next, we go down to series. That's where the magic really happens. So I'm going to add that other data because I wanted you to see here how that would impact it. So if I had my mass 2 in this data set as well, I could adjust my first set. So like, let's say this was Mason's and the other one was Noah's. So I wanted Mason's to be blue circles and Noah's are red circles, but I could change his to triangles and his to stars if I wanted. So that is a really easy way. If you've got multiple things you're looking at, that you can change what's going on there to see it easier. You can also make it bigger like we talked about. All right, so that is that. All right, now let's scroll down. This is where the magic really happens when we are graphing. The big benefit to graphing is to be able to quickly get a visual for what your data did. And in spreadsheets and Excel, if you ever use it, you can actually get it to average all this data for you by doing a best fit line. So what we're going to do is add a trend line. So our whole goal is to see, is there a trend or a correlation or a causation between, as time passes, how the mass is changing. Now we have a really, really small sample size. So in theory, we should have a much bigger sample size and repeated testing. But for the sake of time here, let's just say, yes, this data leads us to believe we might, in fact, have a trend here. Now, logically, if you had chewed for an extended period of time, it would have plateaued at some point and not continued to lose mass, you would hope. But we've got our trend line. So now what we want to do is, there are other options, but because of our math level and our skills, I think our equation for a line that we know is the y equals mx plus b, which is a linear line, a straight line. Change your line color if you wanted to. And this is actually averaging all my data. Okay, so remember how I have both of theirs? So if I had had them chewing the same gum, this might have been a handy tool to look at. I'm going to delete one of them so it looks back to what your data looks like. All right, so this looks kind of similar to hopefully what you've got going on. Now we've checked the trend line. We've made sure it's a linear line. The opacity is kind of driving me crazy. Opacity, if it's opaque, you cannot see through it. If it is translucent, you can see through it a little bit. So it kind of makes it more translucent the less opaque we make it. But I'm going to put it at 100% and the thickness a little thicker so you can see it nice. Oop. The second you check that trend line box, that is when this line option pops up for you. So linear line. And then when you check that, these options pop up. So what I want to change that label where it says none to is use equation. That's where I get that equation that I want you to analyze. That is the whole point of this lab, is to figure out how much mass it was losing. And that equation will spit it out for you. R squared is a way to show an average. You don't have to do that, but some kids checked it and they got confused. So don't worry about that. If you take stats, you will learn about R squared. Legend, once I clicked that, it popped up with the legend option. That is where I can tell this the color and the font and the size and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to crank it up a notch. Oh, that was a little excessive. Let's go 16. And I should probably change to Comic Sans because that is the rest of my graph. All right. Now down horizontal axis, this is this guy. You can do everything from tell it where you want those ticks, those grid lines to fall, to little ticks, which I will show you. Let's change that to Comic Sans as well. Crank it up. Nope, too much again. Too much. Bold. Yeah. All right. I prefer you set your minimum value to 0. I do not like it when you can't see that left axis, especially when we're trying to analyze our y-axis intercept, which should have been 1.16 here. And if that line isn't there, I think it's kind of hard to visualize that. If you wanted your maximum value to like fall past your line so you can get a better scope, I'm going to crank mine up to 650 so I can kind of see that it continues on past that. I would uncheck this box, allow bounds to hide data. What that means is sometimes it can just crop out your data because it wants to. I would uncheck that. Mine doesn't because I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And that's how many data points I had. Hopefully you had more, but if not, that's okay. Scale factor would multiply everything by a scale. Let's not do that. If you want your labels to like go at an angle, sometimes when you like have a ton of them, that's kind of handy, but I'm going to keep mine to where they are. The number format just means that it's going to pull how many decimals, and like if you had a currency in here, it would be like dollars. It would spit that out, like if you wanted to change it to dollars. But let's just go pull from source, meaning it does what you had in the table. All right, let's do the vertical right quick. So this guy, I'm going to change those. Again, I've changed everything to Comic Sans. I've changed those to 18, changed everything to black. Show axis line. So let's say that this line didn't appear when I set the axis to 0. You would check that box to make sure it stays there. It did not auto to that, which kind of bothered me. If you wanted to, you could like crank it up to 1.5 and just kind of bring that down to the middle a bit. The whole point is you want to be able to see all your data and not try to skew it or make it look different than it is. Like try to get the full picture here. We're not going to scale it. We're not going to change the data source. This bottom tab actually is new this year. The grid lines and ticks they've added, which is kind of cool. You can adjust where, we could always change the spacing, but now you can actually adjust, oh, I want step. So let's say I wanted to set my step on my horizontal to 120. That's kind of handy because then that puts our data collection on every grid line, which makes it super easy to see. and your minor count. So let's say that I wanted that every 10, so that make little tiny lines every 10. Or if I wanted it every 20, or say 60. Oh, that's how many it's putting there. Let's go 4. So that puts 4 lines in between it. Step would actually tell me what values if I wanted it every 20. So that'd be 20, 40, 60. So that's just if you're trying to look at your data, this will really help analyzing. Now, the major grid lines are the lines that you see. The minor grid lines are the light ones in between. You can also, I guess if you really wanted to change those colors so you can see that. That's the minor lines. I'm going to go back to a light gray. Oh, come on. I think I really like the ticks, though. So that kind of puts that little crosshair section there. We can make it go inside, and you can make it longer, shorter, however you want, make it thicker. That just kind of marks where those numbers are at. You can also add minor ticks if you really wanted, so that just kind of breaks it out, really makes a jump for you. So I'm on the horizontal. You could do the same thing to the vertical. We really didn't have an interval for the vertical that would make the most sense, so this is fine. You could add your major and minor ticks again if you really wanted to. If you're having a hard time seeing where those fall, you could also add minor grid lines. And once you click that, you're able to do some changing the color and such. But then you could kind of get a view, like if there was 1, 2, 3 in between, like where those numbers are actually falling. You could also get it where it labels these if you really wanted to. But all right, that's a whole breakdown of how to work this. If you ever get out of your editor and you want to get back in, you just double click on your chart and it'll pull right back up. Remember, the setup is like what data and where do you want it, and the customize is like all the finessing. Your goal is to make it look professional and show your data in a professional manner and to make sure it's legible. So here are my data graph and my data table. I think there's a couple other options we can check out up here. Obviously font. I showed you guys strike through, which is kind of cool. Let's say you ended up realizing that data was crap, like this one didn't pan out. You could strike through it. I would never delete data from a table, but you could strike through it, and just to show that you ended up realizing that was wrong, and you could add another row to overcome it there. If we look, there's one other thing up here I wanted to show you guys. I'm trying to remember. Oh, so I mentioned briefly the functions that a spreadsheet can do. Here you can get an idea of all the different functions that Sheets is actually capable of doing, which is kind of interesting. Feel free to check those out sometime. All right, I think that's about it.